All right, all my tech folks, don't judge me, but I'm just now figuring out what Alphabet is. Okay, whenever like Manga or Fang or the bigger tech companies and stuff lately for the past like year and some change, I've been particularly noticing this company that's been popping up called Alphabet, and I've been wondering what the heck is Alphabet. I've never heard of it, and it seems like it's kind of just popped out of nowhere. So, for the sake of this video, I decided to finally do a little bit of research and figure out what Alphabet is because it just popped into my mind. And I figure we can go over a key business concept that goes along with this as well, because I kept thinking Alphabet and Google were like the same thing, but it still was like throwing me off. So, I finally figured out at least part of the situation. So, let's dive into this and figure out what we can take from this. So, like I said, for the longest time, I did not know what the company Alphabet was, what it was about, where it came from, because all of a sudden I keep seeing news articles about it, people on LinkedIn and other platforms talking about it, and I just didn't know what this was. I just knew there was some relation to Google, but I was like, Google's its own thing. What's this Alphabet thing? So that's when I did a little research, and here's what I found. Up until October of 2015, Google operated under its name, its regular name, as we've always known it, Google. But after October 2015, Google did something that a lot of companies are doing or are claiming that they're doing these days, which is restructuring. They restructured the entire layout of the company. This is pretty important because it affects basically how the company or multiple companies run, whether that's parent to child companies and different things like that. Speaking of parent child companies, that's basically what happened. At one point, up until October 2015, Google was the head honcho of the entire, you can say, Google brand. And Google owned YouTube. Of course, it had the browsing engine. Anything else, any other smaller companies that Google owned either the majority of or completely bought out was under Google's name. And the main name of everything was Google. That's no longer the case. The big name of the entire brand is now Alphabet, and Google is no longer the head honcho or the top name in that list. It's now under the name Alphabet. Alphabet, after the restructuring in 2015, became the holding company, which holds controlling stock or stake in Google and some of the other subsidiaries that Google already owned before it restructured. So that brings up one question. What's a holding company and what exactly are they used for? So before we get into that, the one thing about businesses, because everyone's trying to be an entrepreneur these days, nobody wants to deal with the typical 9 to 5s. This whole back and forth that's been going on for the last handful of years, if not longer, it's just become a nonstop thing about everyone needs to be an entrepreneur somehow, right? And not everyone wants to do that. Not everyone's capable of doing that because you have to produce your own products or services. Your schedule obviously needs to be open to entertain that. It may be a second or third job, depending on how many regular, full time, or even part time jobs you're working at that time. It depends, but it also depends on what products or services you're offering. Do you provide consultation services where you can entertain that from any part of the world, really? Do you have shirts, different type of clothes and apparel that you sell that maybe you make by hand that the quality is better because you handle it, or do you outsource it to somebody else that handles it? All these different things. That's how we've come to understand businesses, in that basically they need to put something out, music, art, something needs to come out of the business that people want to put their money to, and that's how the companies make money. This applies for, as far as I know, all business types except for holding companies. So holding companies are businesses like anything else, except they don't do anything. They don't produce any products, they don't produce any services. You don't hit up Alphabet for tech support to ask questions about Google, the search engine. You don't hit up Alphabet for that, even though they're the holding company of Google and a bunch of different companies. You go to Google directly for those questions. But for Alphabet, they're kind of just there to essentially help manage the way that these different companies run. But it also makes documentation a bunch of things easier. But that's deeper down the rabbit hole. But to get back on track, like I said, the whole purpose of holding companies is not to actually produce any products or services. They don't have regular everyday operations. They don't have any warehouses. They don't have any of that stuff because they don't actually do anything. The whole purpose of holding companies, as the name suggests, is to hold a controlling stake or to just completely buy out different companies that will fall under its own umbrella. So when you say controlling stakes, just to clear that up, it's basically the whole 51-49 thing. Like if it's an argument, whether it's the whole argument about childbearing, who has the controlling word when it comes to kids, who has the controlling word when it comes to legal issues, related to marriage or business relations, right? Who, people can put in their vote, but who ultimately is the one that says, yeah, we're going to do this or we're not doing this. That's where you have the 51-49 concept. Everything might be even at 50-50, but maybe one little detail or, some the pendulum swinging the other way in some form makes it so that one person has 51% say and the other person has 49. So the one with 51 automatically overrules everything else that's been said. That's the whole purpose of a holding company. A holding company, again, is meant to hold controlling stakes, meaning they have that 51%, if not more, so that whatever they say when it comes to how that company operates, obviously there has to be publicly traded, which is something else we can get into now that I think about it. But when it comes to how these different companies run and that they may be on the board of directors or anything like that, it's the holding company when they hold 51% that says, ultimately, this is where we want the company to go when it comes to this project or for the brand, whatever, circumstance that they're tackling at that point in time. That's what it means by controlling stake. They're the one that ultimately swings the pendulum, whatever which way they want it to go. Versus the other option is basically that same concept, but they just completely buy out the companies. Also, they can create other brands or other companies that fall under their umbrella. So Alphabet can acquire other companies and make it fall under their umbrella so that they can either be subsidiaries of Google or they can just be subsidiaries of Alphabet, but they'll be on the same level or tier in the hierarchy, in the structure, the business structure, as Google, right? But the other thing is that if someone from Alphabet, someone who runs Alphabet or has ownership of the name is like, hey, I want to create a whole new line of products and services and I want to put them under a different subsidiary name. So, they'll still be part of the Alphabet family, but they'll be separate from Google. They'll have their own operations, their own products, their own services. We hire new people, all that stuff. Google and this new company can be related in that they fall under the same subsidiary name, but they don't overlap necessarily day to day when it comes to the stuff that they're doing. So say for example, if Alphabet wanted to suddenly create a clothing line and nothing else, like just focus on clothes, and they wanted to put that under a separate name, you're going to notice that that company, whatever clothing name that they give it, you'll notice that, oh, Alphabet owns this clothing line, but they also own Google. I wonder if we can call Google when it comes to information about this clothing line. You probably can get a little bit of information, but you're probably not going to get much because the fact of the matter is they are still separate companies when it comes down to it. One focuses on clothing and stuff, the other one focuses on technology. The people who run both or have ownership of both may be the same, but the companies are still their own children. Again, that's why it's like parent, child. You may have siblings, twins, triplets, or just, siblings in different ages. They have certain things in common, obviously, because they came from the same parents. That's the idea. But they're still their own people when it comes down to it. So you don't necessarily, or rather, you probably shouldn't, and this is coming from a sibling, you probably don't want to always ask one sibling what's going on with another one. Just because we're related don't mean we always know what's going on with each other. Another way to think about this is, let's take a look at the Teen Titans show, their first original Teen Titans show from when us millennials were kids. I want to say like elementary to middle school age, the good one. I won't say the good one. I take that back because I haven't seen Teen Titans Go. I've heard some people say it's actually better than people give it credit for. But as far as the whole just changing animation and design, it just threw me off. So personally, I never got into it. But either way, we're going with the original Teen Titans series here. If you remember the OG Teen Titans cartoon, there was one episode that focused on Raven, Cyborg, and Beast Boy, and more so Raven than anything. So Raven in Teen Titans, at least in the old cartoon version of her, and maybe in general in the comics, I don't completely know, but at least with that old cartoon, Raven was not a friendly person. She wasn't terrible, and she was a good guy. She was obviously on the good guy side, hence the Titans or Teen Titans. So they didn't necessarily worry about her there. She did have a shady past and all that stuff that made her off-putting. It made her a little difficult to trust, if anything. But when it came down to it, people knew that they could trust her and she was on people's good side. She liked to protect people. She didn't want to be a bad person. But another thing that kind of didn't help when it came to this and how people perceived her was how secretive she was. So Cyborg and Beast Boy wanted to get to understand her better. She was super private with her room. She didn't like anyone in her room. They waited until they knew that she wasn't home, snuck into her room, started poking around. They found this mirror, this hand mirror, that basically was a portal that sucked them into what they thought was a different dimension. In this different dimension, as they think it is, they encounter Raven, and they start seeing a few different Ravens. They see one that's in green, they see one that's in pink. Her personality keeps changing. They're getting completely thrown off. Eventually, what Cyborg and Beast Boy figure out is that that alternate dimension that they were warped to is not actually an alternate dimension. That mirror was a portal into Raven's mind. So normally on a regular everyday to day basis, Raven is kind of pretty blah, right? She's just kind of there, takes up space, but doesn't necessarily, you know, present her emotions and her personality that often. You kind of have to force her to express herself. But what Cyborg and Beast Boy start finding out when they're in this, like in her head, basically, is they have one version of Raven that's dopey. They have another one that's like she just kicks butt, like she's probably the best warrior out of the bunch. You have another one that's sad. You have another one that's super just happy. Well, that's kind of like the dopey one. You know, and it just goes all the way around. You have one that's like a total bookworm, which she's a little more on display about, but there is a separate one that kind of pops up as for a second that you can tell is like the bookworm side of her. And all these different versions of Raven, if you see the rest of the episode and what happens, all these different versions of Raven are just splinters of herself. They're different parts and chunks of who she is. But when you put them all together, they make the Raven as we know. They create Raven as we know her. You have Raven, like as we know, the main character, but this episode showed a bunch of different pieces and chunks of Raven's personality that also, again, were independent in their own right, but you could easily identify who they were because they did different things, they carried themselves differently, they went about things differently. They were very unique. But when you smack them all together, that's when you have Raven, one of the main characters from Titans or Teen Titans. So it's pretty much that same structure when it comes to businesses. That's where you get holder companies or holding companies, or what can also be called parent companies. And then you have subsidiaries or child companies, the ones that fall below them. The child companies are the same as the different personalities and sides of Raven's personality. The parts that, again, you have one that's very like action based and kick butt. You have another one that's sad. You have one that's a bookworm. You have one where anger is on display. You have one where her kind of shyness and timidness is on display, right? They all do different things, but they're all related. Businesses can be the same, like in my previous example. You can have Google that's tech. You can have, let's say, if they create a clothing line that's just a luxury clothing line. They may have another clothing line that's a little more casual and, you know, more affordable for regular people to grab. They may end up going the whole car route that Apple attempted to go and then scrap Project Titan. But let's say if they want to do that and they want to put that under a whole different name, right? Maybe they have a music label. They want to get crazy and create a Google or record label that people could start signing to. They could do that under a whole different name. And because they're all under the alphabet name, they are all related, but they all do their own thing. Businesses have that same type of structure. So that's what I mean when I say child companies and parent companies, or holder companies and some of their subsidiaries. You have the overarching, you know, umbrella of, you know, that these companies fall under and that they're all related, but they don't all do the same thing. So that's what a holding company does. It's meant to direct and guide the way that these different companies operate. The children can still have their say and vote and all that other stuff, but the idea is that parents ultimately dictate and guide where the children are supposed to go, where the subsidiaries go. That's the whole point of a holding company. It holds 51% decision-making power over the subsidiaries under it. So they ultimately say what's going to happen, what's not going to happen with this company or with this entity. But I'm going to go ahead and leave this video here, guys. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that made sense, especially when I brought in the Teen Titans part with Raven and just the overall illustration. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have any feedback or questions and stuff for me, go ahead and leave that for me in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.